it's all about the user and how they're going to interact with your platform, with your software. And again, this is the issue with like having a product that has all the bells and whistles. Ultimately, if someone can't use all of these bells and whistles and it's not apparent how to use them, it doesn't take them through a nice workflow, then all of that time spent building these amazing, so-called amazing new features that you've added is wasted because no one uses them anyway.
Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm your host, Michael Dean. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. I'm here today with Alex Kountourides, or Alex K, as he often likes to be known. He's the co-founder of Valos. Valos is an AVM platform, if I'm not correct, or is it a broader Proptech company than that?
Yeah, much broader, actually. The antithesis to an AVM.
Excellent. Okay, we'll get into that. So. It's really good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a trained surveyor, qualified surveyor, like I was at least once upon a time. How did you end up in the PropTech space?
It was actually through my experience as a surveyor that basically the whole premise for kind of Valos started. Essentially, and a few people have heard this story before, so I try not to bore the audience, but for everyone new, essentially what happened was when I was at university studying for my real estate masters, in the valuations module, it was really mathematical and analytical. However, when I went into industry, I went on a graduate scheme, and in reality, there was a big disparity between what I learned and thought valuations was at university versus what I was actually doing in practice in the real world. So where I thought valuations would be largely mathematical and analytical, in reality, what I was doing was spending a lot of my time going on lots of different websites to find information relating to the subject property. So, going on finding EPCs and relevant planning applications and whether or not your property is in a conservation area, whether or not it's listed and so on. And actually a very small amount of my time was spent looking at that data to determine the value of the asset itself. And so when I looked at what was out there in the market from a software perspective, stuff to help me in my role and help me do things a little bit quicker, there wasn't really anything there. Everything was actually aimed at what you said before, which was AVMs, automated valuation models. But the whole premise behind that is basically automating the valuer out of the process so you can get to the end number as quick as possible. And what we thought was, well, if we can automate all the administrative aspects to a valuation and a valuation report production, then what you really do is enable the surveyor to focus on the analysis of that data and determination of value to come to the output. So we do everything prior to determining the value to enable and empower the surveyors to actually do the valuation itself. And when we didn't see anything out there in the market that kind of aimed to do that, we decided to set up Valos ourselves.
So how would you better describe Valos then than as opposed to an AVM platform then?
Yeah, it's tricky because originally when we described Valos, it was like the strapline was valuation reports automated, and immediately your mind goes to, okay, well, they're just going to go to the end number. I think the easiest way to describe Valos is a software to empower the valuers to concentrate on what they are actually in the workforce to do, which is determine value and alleviate the more administrative parts of valuation report writing.
Okay. And do you think that the days of human valuations are numbered, or do you think that there is still a place for human valuers in the coming years?
There is definitely still a place, but I think it's more nuanced than that, and I think it depends on the use class you're referring to. So I think what you're seeing more and more is low value residential vanilla assets are being AVM'd, and the necessity for valuers in that space is declining. I think obviously as a lender or as a bank, what you're always going to want to check is does the asset actually exist, and when I turn up to the asset, is everything there as I say it is. So there's a role-ish there, but more and more that's being automated out of the profession. I think what you always have a role for, or at least for the foreseeable future, is high value residential assets or commercial assets, essentially anything where the asset itself is not vanilla and standardized. So you go into one commercial building, you go into another, they look vastly different. Whereas a 3-bed terraced house, like there's not that much differentiation, especially at the lower end of the market. So I think anything high value resi or commercial or mixed use or anything like that, there's still a role for the valuer.
Yeah.
And especially because there is an amount of data and knowledge that isn't available online. So if you're going to AVM something, you're going to always be missing some aspects to it. And that matters less when you're doing large volume at low value and at a fairly low LTV. And that becomes much more of an issue in the other scenarios.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously being in the commercial world, the commercial property market as a investor rather than as a lender, I instinctively kind of agree with what you're saying. Certainly I agree as well that those sort of vanilla resi assets, I mean, the thing that they teach you in week one on our respective real estate undergrad or master's courses was that, the property is not homogenous, right? It's even two identical properties next to each other, one's going to have a slightly different aspect to the other one, right?
Yeah.
So but certainly, if you've got two terraced house in an urban area where there's probably been a spate of transactions of very similar properties on that street, it's probably very easy to generate a valuation from that on an AVM.
Yeah.
However, as you say, a mixed use asset with maybe ground floor commercial or multiple commercial floors, and then you've got residential above. That's a lot more difficult because how do you apply value to that? There isn't the data, for example, for the commercial transactions, or you don't know how many commercial tenants could take that, or even that there are a variety of different uses that I suppose that commercial tenant can use. Yeah,
exactly, and it just requires a bit more thinking, and really it's all about the abundance or lack thereof of evidence in order to help you value the asset itself.
Yeah.
And you've got that evidence when you're looking at more standard residential assets, and you don't have it for the other aspects.
Yeah, I suppose the man on the street, the sort of the man on the Clapham omnibus as we were taught in our training, can easily go on Rightmove and probably do just as good of a job as most residential valuers, I would say, for a lot of assets, because I think you and I both agree that a lot of property is not rocket science. Mm-hmm. I suppose it's just when it becomes more specialist, is how do you then determine that, right? Which is, and I suppose that's the key difference. I'm going to ask a slightly controversial but broad question, which is that what's your general view of the Proptech industry? I suppose being a non-tech person that's come into it, what are the best and the worst things that you've seen of Proptech? Since you've been a Proptech founder?
Interesting. One of the things that I've seen a lot of is solutions being developed that don't really solve a particular need. It's just someone's thought of an idea and then tried to reverse engineer it to try and find a space for it, product market fit. And then what you basically get is just a lot of Proptechs not really doing anything and constantly trying to find and pivot to a position where they can actually start licensing their software. I think what you also have a lot of is oversaturation. So there's a lot of in different particular spaces, there's a lot of tech companies that do really similar things, and it's almost impossible to distinguish the differences between them, and the differences are really subtle, and then that just becomes a race to the bottom, and that's fine for the consumer. But when you start to race to the bottom in terms of pricing, what it stops a Proptech firm from doing, or any company from doing, is improving what they've got, iterating and innovating, because you just don't have the amount of capital that you would have if you were successful, right? If your profit margins shrink, then there is less money there for R&D and to take your product further. So I think they're kind of two key trends. And actually one more is maybe around 3-4 years ago, there was a lot of VC money pouring into the Proptech space. And what that led to was fundamentally inefficient operational models. So people burning a lot of cash, not building sustainable Proptech businesses, and then overpaying for, let's say, human capital in the market and so on. And that creates a really unsustainable model, and it requires basically a restructuring of the Proptech space in general, because that VC money coming in and then just capital being deployed anywhere, all for the sake of just showing growth and not necessarily profitability. It has I think a quite detrimental impact on the rest of the software space.
Do you think that the sort of the property tech space now will actually develop real companies which will have some opportunities to actually be sustainable in the medium to long term, because of the fundraising environment is not, it because it's less fashionable now? Do you think that because the fundraising environment is more difficult, that actually that will keep Proptech founders more honest, and only the very best will get funded?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's a good thing. And it stops, because what you have in SaaS is basically, because of the operating model, is you could feasibly operate a SaaS company with a skeleton team. And so you just get this position where they just never die. They just like teeter and don't really do anything. They don't grow, they don't die, they just stay there, and it's quite easy to maintain. But I think what will happen is, when it becomes harder to get funding, then it forces you to focus on your operational model, making sure that you can actually operate profitably like a standard business might have. And I think what you'll end up seeing in this market is a lot of Proptech firms just kind of going by the wayside and potentially having to fold as well, because they just no longer have the capital to sustain themselves, because they missed out the fundamental step in any business is, who is my market for this product that I've developed, and who can I sell it to? And if you don't have that, then you don't really have a business.
I mean, I've sat on property, in the case of Property Week, I've sat on numerous Proptech awards panels for the Property Week awards. And the number of submissions and the companies that some of the companies that I saw, and the points you made are absolutely right. There were I think I remember one year 4 different firms were doing this exactly the same really narrow niche. And I, and you've got to think, like, the total addressable market in terms of revenue here. I'm going to say, like, it was probably under £1 million for the entirety of the UK market for the issue that they were trying to solve. And there was like 4 or 5 companies just trying to do exactly the same thing. And you think, well, this just isn't sustainable. And you had quite celebrated Proptech founders who were basically just some successful rich property guy's child, and because they had the right face and the right profile and just the right PR, they were being championed by the press titles. But actually, what they were, I mean, you can probably hazard a guess as to who I'm maybe referring to here. And ultimately, their product is rubbish, and no one wants to buy it.
And it's difficult. These awards, I think I've always taken them kind of at face value. So they are vanity awards. Correct. And ultimately, what really matters is not how many awards you can say you've won. Property Week and EG Awards and whatever other awards there are, UK PA Awards and whatnot. Doesn't really show anything. The only thing that really matters is, what is your annual recurring revenue? What is your profitability? What is your growth rate? And that's the only metric that really matters in a business. The other things are like nice additions, and it's nice to be recognized or whatever, but there's also a lot of smoke and mirrors behind awards in general. And awards are great, as I said, but they don't really paint the whole story.
I think awards in my view are they're lovely, but really they don't pay people's salaries. They're not going to put my kids through school. They are a nice marketing tool, but I don't think that they. But I think you have to take, as you say, them with a pinch of salt, and and take them for what they are. essentially.
Exactly. And I think you articulated it well. They are just a nice marketing tool. And what I always say is, it doesn't really matter if you win or not, because you probably get 80% of the publicity by just being nominated.
Yeah.
So actually winning is just a logo you can put on your
Correct.
website, but you can get all, or 80% of of the marketing just from being nominated.
You get a nice LinkedIn post with
exactly,
shaking Martin Bayfield's hand or whatever, right? So, well, speaking of which, Props Awards this year, we'll definitely, saying that I'm going to be complete hypocrite and say, right, get yourself nominated for a Props Awards. Avonmore Capital is the sponsor of the Future of Real Estate Award, so you'll definitely be someone I'll be tapping up afterwards to put yourself forward for nomination. Nominations close, I think, 30th of Jan. So
okay, we'll get on that.
We'll get a link in the bio too. But how did you go from being a real estate grad to tech entrepreneur?
So I left my role in 2018 after I got qualified, but actually, in hindsight, and you do silly things when you're slightly younger, you don't really think about the consequences. So actually, me and my other business partner, so there's 3 founders at Valos. Me and my other business partner, we've known each other since we were 10 years old, and we were both doing graduate schemes at surveying firms. And we ended up handing in our notice before we passed our APCs. So if we hadn't have passed our APCs, I'm not entirely sure what we would have done. So we gambled and banked a lot on us being able to actually just pass it in the first place. But essentially what happened was 2018 we left, and the premise for Valos was always there. It's just that we didn't have tech knowledge and we didn't have any money either. And so then we started figuring out, okay, well, how can we support ourselves now without any income, but also support our long-term venture of building Valos? So we set up an investment development agency type business. And all we did there was try and find sites for people and benefit from an agency fee, and then use that capital to then invest into building Valos. And we did that for the best part of 2 years. Did a few deals. That was all well and good. And then we managed to build up a bit of capital. And then at that point, we started trying to both raise VC capital and find a technical co-founder. And we got very lucky with how we found our technical co-founder in the end, which actually meant that we no longer needed to find VC capital, because the whole premise behind the VC money was to build and grow a team. But actually with our CTO that we found, who became a co-founder, we no longer needed that capital. We could just build as a 3. So we started that in May 2020, just before lockdown, which was like perfect timing. And then for the best part of 2 years, me and Rob, who's one of the co-founders, we were working in a shed in my mum's back garden, which we completely renovated it. So I took all the stuff out the shed, found a new home for that, and then we did the whole thing. We put in insulation, we put in carpet, skirting boards, the whole thing. It looked like a proper office, but we really underestimated kind of the climate control in there, temperature control. So what would happen is we massively over insulated it. So during winter, we'd have the door open and the heating on because there was no other way to control it. So you'd have the snow coming down and the heating on. It was a weird dynamic. But so during that time is basically when we just developed Valos. And then by 2022, we basically had a product where we could raise a little bit of capital, but in this case from angels and high net worths, just so we could kind of get that initial cash injection to start hiring and building the company. And that's what we did. And then we've been basically going since 2020. But for us, the operating model has always been, how do we build a fundamentally sustainable business so that we don't need to rely on external capital to prop us up?
Yeah.
And that was always one of the key drivers. But it's quite a different proposition being a graduate surveyor to running a tech business.
So you've in a space of 7-8 years, you've gone from quitting your job just before you passed your APC, to become a qualified chartered surveyor, to effectively being sort of grizzled tech co-founder essentially.
Yeah.
So in those early days in your mum's shed, how did you go about building the tech with the tech co-founder? I assume the tech co-founder he was remote from you guys.
Yeah, based in Bristol.
Yeah.
So what we did really was we sat down and we basically just discussed what is required here for a product. What is the issue we're actually trying to solve? And we looked at the entirety of the valuation process from start to finish, including inspections, the gathering of comps, the report production itself, the gathering of different data. And we analyzed that in terms of, well, if we can break this down into individual buckets, then we can see where is most of the time being spent and where can we as a tech firm have the most impact in reducing the manual time spent on certain things. So for example, when we analyzed it, we said, okay, well, actually there's a lot of time spent on inspections. But if you break that down further, most of the time spent on inspection is getting to and from the property, and that's not something you can automate. So that was something that we looked at, and on the surface it looks like a good problem to solve, but when you dig into it, actually the main issue with that is obviously getting to and from the property. So we looked at all the other aspects as well, the data gathering, the report writing, and so on. And it was in breaking down those different tasks that we thought, okay, this is how we envisage the product starting. This is where we think we can have the most immediate impact. We built that and then started iterating from there. And I think one of the key things that we've always done is stay as close to the customer as possible. So always iterating with them and always asking them, what are their other problems? What are the issues they're facing in their day-to-day? Because things have evolved since I was doing valuations, and unless you're constantly speaking to your market, number one, you may not be going down the right routes that you should be going down. But number two, you also get presented with new possible avenues to further build and expand the company.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll touch on those.
Sure.
We'll touch on those in a bit. Certainly on my list of questions to ask. I guess the first, having been through the tech journey and having built, I suppose a sort of essentially completely digitized version of what was our analog business. And that's a journey that's taken us 2 years now. And we probably had a few more resources than you would have done in doing that. But how would you describe the experience of working with your technical co-founder in actually translating the commercial ideas into a technical reality?
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. I think in running any business is the communication between the business side of things and the tech side of things. And also from a business perspective, it's for me understanding what is and isn't possible in the technical world. So we're quite fortunate in that our CTO has good business acumen, was from a finance background, was a exotics derivatives trader, and so he kind of understood the business side of things, which made things a lot easier. But what we always, the more difficult aspect was actually how can we bring him up to speed with the property side of things and help him understand the industry. And it was less about the business and more about the solution that we're trying to build here and the problem that we're solving.
Correct, yeah.
And so what we actually did, so Rob and I, the non-technical founders, we took a Python course so we could try and get an understanding for the fundamentals of technology. And we gave Jan, our CTO, the other co-founder, all our APC notes. And just he read through them and the Red Book to try and get an understanding for what that was about.
That's absolute genius. It's really interesting that you and Rob did a Python course because both Zahir and I, kind of what prompted a lot of our tech journey was in 2023. He learned Python. Yeah, we completely independently. He learned Python, and I went on a Replit 100 Days of Code course, which was mainly Python based, but with a bit more HTML and CSS and all that kind of stuff thrown into it. And so, as a consequence of that, like we both know enough to be dangerous, like maybe not enough to be useful, but I think that's really valuable. And I love that you kind of have done that because it mirrors our own journey.
Yeah.
But it means that I think that that's a mistake. I say mistake, but I think it's a challenge that you see it time and again, where businesses struggle to develop their own tech, whether they're building in-house or whether they're paying someone to build it, because the people at the commercial side don't really understand the technical side of things.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you just having that ability to converse technically with the actual technical people does make just makes life that bit easier.
Yeah.
And I suppose by at the same time, if Jan, your technical co-founder, the fact that he has a good understanding of the I suppose the commercial problem, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think that one of the key things is how do you... Business people will talk a specific language, property people will talk a specific language, tech people will speak a specific language, and it's how do you kind of manage that so that you're all speaking the same language, and that's quite a difficult thing to overcome. The other challenge when you look at other firms that have potentially tried to develop out technology, especially if you're a larger firm, is moving away from the problem you're solving, because you have too many people that want to input into what this solution should look like, and then you end up building this, or attempting to build this all singing, all dancing, all the bells and whistles type software that actually then doesn't really do anything well. And so what we've always found is, if you are just really focused on the problem that you're trying to solve, and everything else you just kind of push to the side, it enables you to really develop a solution that actually works. And I think where a lot of firms do go wrong is just losing track of that focus and having too many people input into, oh, this would be good, this would be nice to add, can we put that in? And then by the end of it, it's just like this whole Frankenstein monstrosity that doesn't do anything.
So we had a friend of mine, Sean, come and have a chat with us. He's a UI UX specialist, and he described it as he described our platform as a bit like Homer Simpson's car, from a UI UX perspective, where essentially it's sort of if you continue to bolt on and add new features onto something, it is going to maybe resemble something a little bit should we say under optimized, shall we say? That would be very kind. So one of the things, ironically, that we're now focused on is that, because I guess if I think I like from a tech perspective, I love the sort of move fast and break things, and I love to iterate, and so on and so forth. But the downside is that actually by adding lots of features in a hurry, you can create a lot of functionality, a huge amount of functionality, but sometimes that functionality isn't even apparent because you haven't made the user interface and user experience sufficiently optimized.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's all about the user and how they're going to interact with your platform, with your software. And again, this is the issue with like having a product that has all the bells and whistles. Ultimately, if someone can't use all of these bells and whistles and it's not apparent how to use them, it doesn't take them through a nice workflow, then all of that time spent building these so-called amazing new features that you've added is wasted because no one uses them anyway. And our thing has always been like, how do we just get people to use 80-90% of the product straight off the bat without needing any training, without overcomplicating things? And for the people that want the extra 10%, then there's additional resources there. But really it's about how do you get people using the platform efficiently and quickly, because no one can be bothered to sit through a training session and go through endless FAQs and documentation. Like, people have jobs to get on with.
If you have to do that, if you have to give if you need a 4-hour training course for someone to use your software, you've probably failed. It's probably not a recipe for success.
No, it's a massive barrier to adoption. And it's a unnecessary cost as well. Like, there's no need for that if you just develop things in an efficient way.
This episode was sponsored by Avamore Capital. Ground up development, refurbishment, part completed projects, fast bridging. Avamore Capital backs you through every stage. Direct access to experts who understand your timeline and pressures. Fast decisions, clear communication, no shuffling between departments or re-explaining your deal. From foundations to exit, Avamore delivers the expertise and funding solutions to keep projects moving. Visit avamorecapital.com. So let's talk about customers, because you brought up customers and users. How long did it take you to get your first customer?
From the point that we raised capital, which was the beginning of 2022, it took us a couple of weeks to get our first paying customer, which was actually a surveying firm on my high street in North London, on Totteridge Whetstone High Street, more under Taylor. So that was our first.
Got to give them a plug as your first customer.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they deserve it.
They do deserve it, and it's still a customer to this day, which is nice. And so interestingly, our first customer was acquired in a week or two after having raised, and that was essentially a one-man band valuation firm, as in doing the actual valuations.
And you can see the logic for them, because if you can save them, if you can save a very small practice some time, that has real meaningful consequences for them, right?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, so one of the key kind of pushbacks that we get, especially for smaller firms, is, they see all the logos that we put on there for marketing purposes and say, oh, you work with Cushman and Knight Frank and AY and so on and so forth. It's not going to be a product for me. But actually, the reality is vastly different than that, because ultimately, the process for doing a valuation report, irrespective of if you're a CBRE or a one-man band, is the exact same thing. Your output is the same. It's a valuation report telling you a story about the property and the value of the asset itself. And so there's no difference in terms of that undertaking. But where I believe that the smaller firms probably have a slight edge when they use a system like Valos is it levels the playing field, because when you're a smaller firm, you don't have the benefit of a support or an admin team or graduates necessarily to do that grunt work that we as graduates got told to do. So it's a fee winning partner, for example. You're supposed to be out doing BD, getting business and so on, and doing the valuation report, and you don't have anyone to offload that grunt work to, so you end up doing it. Well, actually, with a system like Valos, is you no longer have to do that side of things, because it's automated for you. So it helps levels the playing field, and it means that you can then allocate your time to running the business, doing the valuation, the actual valuation work, or winning new business. And that's kind of a key aspect in there. And that's why I say to smaller or mid-sized firms, actually, you probably have a higher ROI, because you as a fee-earning partner are now going to alleviate a lot of your time, which would have otherwise been spent on that grunt work.
And in terms of the kind of potential market for valuation firms to take your product, how much sort of market penetration have you achieved so far, would you say?
Substantial, but it kind of depends on how you look at the market. So if you look at it in terms of the number of firms versus the market share that each firm has, they're quite different numbers. So there's, roughly 4,500 valuation firms, or firms that do valuation work in the UK. We have several hundred clients, but there's a really long tail. So there's probably about 2,000 plus valuation firms, which are between 1 and 3 man bands. But if you look at the market in terms of the number of reports done by firm, it's hard to say. And I'll tell you why it's hard to say. It's because it's quite a difficult thing to actually determine how many valuation reports are done in a year. Most valuation firms, certainly prior to Valos, couldn't tell you, in 2025 we did X amount of valuation reports, in 2024 we did X amount, and so on. And so actually it's quite hard to determine how many valuation reports are done in the market in the year. But I'd assume probably close to 50% of the market we would have. Certainly all of the, let's say, top 10, top 20 firms, and then we've got a long tail of clients as well. So, but it's hard to really pinpoint the penetration.
No. Do you? I guess the point is, like, have you reached the sort of the middle of the bell curve yet in terms of the in terms of sort of market penetration, or have you still got a bit of a way to go?
No, I think we probably reached that middle point. So really before, in like the first couple of years, it was like getting Valos gets you ahead of the curve, ahead of your competition. And now not having Valos means that you're falling behind. Exactly. So we've kind of passed that tipping point, which is good. And now when we speak to a lot of prospects and so on, the name Valos, they know what it is, they know what we do. So we've kind of got that penetration, certainly from a brand awareness perspective.
Did you find getting traction difficult in the early days, aside maybe from some of the, smaller firms who are willing to give it a go?
No.
Okay.
So back to the so our first two clients, and it's quite an interesting dynamic and the disparity in size between the two. So as I said, our first client, Maunda Taylor, for all intents and purposes, one-man band. And our second client, maybe a few weeks or month after that, was Avison Young, which is
it's quite a different, quite like you say, quite the disparity in scale.
Yeah, exactly. But it shows kind of the application of Valos across the market, but also, and I think the reason why we never really struggled with getting that traction and why we were fortunate enough to kind of get a lot of clients fairly quickly is because we were solving a real world problem.
Yeah,
we knew really well and really deeply what the struggle was for valuers in the space, and we thought we knew how to solve it with our system. So I fortunately for us, we've never really experienced that. Oh, we need to iterate to find product market fit, and we need to, because we kind of knew straight off the bat what we were trying to do and how we were trying to solve it, which is fortunate.
No, I mean it's fantastic that you've had the success that you've had, because I think a lot of Proptech founders or even fintech founders find, I think especially going into, I just think that the property industry is very much occupied by Luddites, which creates opportunities as you've demonstrated, but on the other hand present challenges, because you have to overcome existing working practices that and I think just a general skepticism of, I think, going back to what we were talking about with regarding Proptech, when you try and sort of get your foot in the door, it's just a lot of the time when I get an email from a Proptech company, I'm just like straight to bin, right, a la poubelle, because you're just going, well, this is going to be more nonsense, isn't it? It's going to solve, as we said, a really narrow niche that I don't think I necessarily, or as you pointed out, telling me about a problem that I didn't really know I had.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe slightly different, because sometimes you're not aware of how much of a problem something is until someone presents you the solution. So you've got like Uber, for example. No one really thought getting a cab was an issue. You call up your local cabbie or whatever, you held down a black cab, fine. So it wasn't really a problem, but then when you get presented with a better way to do it, then you go, oh yeah, well, it's actually a problem of what we're doing. But that's not to say that, Valos didn't have any, or doesn't even to this day have any pushback, and like, it's not all plain sailing, it's not all easy sales. So a lot of the time you get pushback on, for example, if you're a larger firm, you have a lot of graduates, what are my graduates going to do? If we implement Valos, then who's going to do that grunt work? That's potentially one of the pushbacks. But I find it a really an odd thing to say, because on the flip side of that, people are saying, oh, there's not a lot of valuers coming into the space, there's not a lot of new talent coming into the market. And then you say, well, they're not coming into the market because you just load them with this grunt work and you get them to do really mundane things that aren't really developing them as individuals, as professionals, as surveyors. And so on the one hand, you're saying Valos is going to take that away, but on the other hand, you're also wondering why no one's coming into the space.
Well, the thing is, no one going into the space. I think the point is, like, most chartered surveying practices, when they train graduates up, the graduates have to do a seat-in valuation. By some miracle, by the way, I managed to get qualified without ever doing a red book valuation in my life. Yeah, I know. It's
the only rotation I did.
I somehow managed to persuade whoever needed persuading that I got enough valuation experience by doing market appraisals of commercial office leases in the city. But anyway, I digress. But your point is right, which is that I think that and by the way, this is not a surveying related issue. I think that a lot of businesses large businesses have a tendency to load very boring, very mundane, very low quality work experience for their junior staff.
Yeah.
And I can give an example. My first seat when I started my career at Cushman & Wakefield, my first seat was a year in retail warehouse rent review. I did get to do a little bit of agency, a bit of L&T work that was a bit fun.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of that time phoning up agents, asking them for comps, and the rest of the time was doing bindings for third-party submissions. And I was really bad at that. Like my boss would get phone calls from like the independent expert going, yeah, you sent me like you have to send it like in triplicate, I think, and it's like, yeah, two of the three, all three of the bound copies that you sent us that had pages missing or pages off.
Nice.
So I was like, oh, I think the only thing I did remotely well in that first year was make tea. So, but I think the point stands that actually no, you in both of those cases, in both of our cases, I think we'd probably say, yeah, there was probably better ways that our talents could have been put to better use.
Yeah, definitely. And I think doing that work is important. I think every grad should have to do some of that grunt work just to learn the process and understand it fully. But there's only so much value you can gain from doing that. And once you've done it 5 or 10 times, there's nothing else you're gaining apart from inefficiencies.
Correct. Yeah, and it's almost like it becomes a sort of like inherited trauma that you then feel like you have to pass down to the next graduate.
Yeah, I had to do it, so now you have to do it, and I want to see you endure that same pain that I did.
Yeah, I think thankfully neither of us are wired that way. I'd like to think that the people who come to us to Avonmore as a graduate, they have far more challenging and rewarding work, and I know they do. But in terms of competition, was there much competition when you got started for offering similar products? And I suppose maybe more likely have people started to come out of the woodwork trying to do the same as you?
Yeah. So when we launched, there was really no competition, and that was probably the case for best part of 2-3 years at least.
Yeah.
So what that really enabled us to do is get a strong foothold in the market, iterate and develop the product, and do so in the right ways. Since the success of Valos, has been maybe one or two that have tried to replicate what we've done, but it's really hard to replicate what we've done in a short amount of time because it's taken 5-6 years now to get to this space. And, when you're playing catch up in a market, you're always going to be a step behind the innovator.
Correct.
Because you not only have to get to where we are now, which took us 6 years, you also then have to keep up with our pace of innovation.
Correct.
And that's a really tricky thing to do. And then what you tend to do is you tend to cut corners to try and get to a perceived place where, what we do and what Valos does is the same, but actually underneath the bonnet, the data you're gathering is not as accurate. You don't have the report writing capabilities that we do. You don't have all the different features and stuff. So you try to take shortcuts to try and keep up with us. And then you get a few paying customers, and then very quickly they realize, actually, what I've been sold here is not what's happening in practice. And there's quite a big disparity between the two. I think competition's good, and it helps drive innovation. It keeps you on the ball and it keeps you honest. So it's certainly not anything to be feared or anything in that sense. But I think what what we've developed is actually technically quite difficult to do, which is why you haven't seen a whole lot of people come into this space anyway. That on top of us having quite a large chunk of the market probably makes it slightly more unattractive, because then you have to be 10 times better than us or 10 times cheaper than us, and we haven't increased our pricing since we launched, which is another interesting decision that we've taken. So since we launched 2022, we haven't changed our pricing despite adding a whole range of different data sets, a whole range of different features, because we always want to ensure that our clients are getting the value that they deserve from the product. And because, speaking with other clients, and their frustration with other tech companies in the space is because they don't have any competitors, they feel like they're being held to ransom because every year their pricing is increasing exponentially, and it's just not comparative with the value that product provides. And then they end up resenting those tech firms for overcharging them.
Well, I guess, if you speak to a lot of estate agents, the way they feel about Rightmove, for example, it's like you can't exist without Rightmove, and Rightmove knows that you can't exist without them. Yeah. So as a consequence of that, Rightmove knows that the pricing power that they have
is substantial.
And I guess, the people behind Rightmove, or the people that own Rightmove, they want to see revenues grow year on year. So there's how do they grow? There's only so much additional products that they can sell. Yeah. Outside of their core remit. So the only other ways you can get more revenue is by charging clients more.
Yeah. Well, yes, but you can charge the clients more, but also provide more value. It's what you get when you end up charging clients more for the same product that they've always used is resentment and a willingness from the market to try new things, because what you're selling to them is no longer sustainable in terms of pricing. Correct. It's no longer worth the investment for them to use your platform. So you get encouragement from the market, who are all using your product anyway, for new entrants to come into the market to make it more competitive. Whereas if you keep your pricing honest and relative to the value that you provide, you keep your clients happy, you keep their revenue sustained over a long term, and you develop with your clients, and you can build out new features, new products with your clients, and they'll happily pay more for that. But you're always keeping your pricing relative to the value that you're providing them. And there's other ways that you can appeal to different markets, different geographies, or just increase the value that you're providing in your market. You don't always have to just squeeze your core user base for everything that you can to increase your revenue. It's quite short-sighted, I feel.
And what does growth look like for you then as a business? You will, I suppose, invariably reach a saturation point in terms of the number of firms that you can be working with. Yeah. So where do you go from there?
So there's kind of two obvious routes for us to go to. It's doing what Valos does in different geographies, and because we've got a lot of the global firms already using the platform anyway, it's a really good into those other markets, into those other geographies. So across EMEA, or looking at the kind of North America, or even the Middle East, we can then start to go into those markets, or at least at the very least explore those markets with the existing firms that we already have on board. It makes it slightly easier, and then you've got a whole valuation space to go after essentially globally. Yeah. So that's one avenue, and the other avenue, which we've kind of just started going into at the moment, is what are the kind of adjacent markets that are also relevant to our clients that we can go into to help provide value in that entirety of the ecosystem. And that's what we've kind of done with the lender product that we've developed and that we've launched, and we've done that in collaboration both with Santander and with Barclays as well. And this is a really good example of how do you come up with new ideas, new developments, new markets. You do so by staying close to your core market and by speaking to your clients. So in developing this lender product, and I'm happy to explain what it does.
Please, yeah.
But in developing it, what we realized through speaking to our clients is they have an issue at the moment with how instructions are done. You get loads of different lenders, loads of different banks, lots of panel managers as well, giving different instructions, but often at times the information provided to them is not clear. So you're being asked to quote on assets that you're not entirely sure what you're supposed to be valuing. You don't have enough detail there. Communication is quite fragmented. It's done via emails, via multiple different platforms and so on. You've got specific lender requirements that you have to adhere to, but it's really difficult to disseminate those across your entirety of your valuers. So for example, if a particular bank says, okay, well, I always need you to meet these specific requirements, then that's easy. But when you're a valuation firm with 50 different lending clients and you've got all of these different requirements you have to adhere to, it's quite difficult to make sure that every single surveyor is adhering to those requirements, because then you essentially have, right, for every commercial red book valuation report we've got this template here, and then we've got a variation of that template for all of our different 50 clients, and then there's an update to the red book. So then we have to update 50 odd different templates to keep in line with those changes. So we solve that on the valuer side of things, but what we've done on the lending side of things is, how do you improve the communication between the valuers and the lenders to reduce the transaction cycle? Because ultimately what both the lenders and the valuers want is the same thing, is they want a valuation report that is done quickly and efficiently and accurately, and once it's sent off, i.e. from the valuer to the lender, they don't see that valuation again. It doesn't come back because you've missed out XYZ, because as soon as that valuation comes back, you're just eroding your profitability, both as a valuer and as a lender. Because again, if you have not lent on the asset as a lender and that capital sitting in your bank, you're losing money because you haven't deployed that capital. So what we've developed is a system for basically the lenders to manage their panel valuers via the Valos platform, go out for quotes, get quotes back, instruct a valuer, and then receive those valuations via the platform as well, so they can do their QA and so on and so forth. And the real benefit for that is, obviously everything's in one platform, so it makes that communication a lot easier, and it drives a lot of automation throughout the process itself. But importantly as well is it provides the valuers clarity with what they're actually quoting on in the first place, which makes quoting more accurate for them. So for example, if you say to me, oh, can you provide a quote on X property or whatever, and I provide that quote, but in doing that quote, I didn't have enough information to accurately quote, and then I find out, it's not a vanilla resi property I'm valuing, it's an HMO, then I have to come back to you and say, oh, can I adjust my quote accordingly? Then you have to go back to the borrower and say, can we adjust your quote, and so on. It just creates a lot of issues in that transaction, which can be avoided. But one of the additional benefits that it also provides is for the lenders to extract data from the valuation report in a structured format to then be able to analyze and review their portfolio in real time as well. So instead of having, again, someone at a firm going, okay, well, this is my valuation report, and then I copy and paste the EPC into this platform, I copy and paste that into that platform, we do it automatically for them. So we can extract that data from the valuation and put it into whatever format, whatever system the lenders want. So it's essentially a panel management software, but I think it's important to distinguish that we're not a panel manager ourselves. So feasibly what you could have is all of these panel managers also operating on or kind of underneath what they're doing. They could be using the Valos platform as a panel management software to connect the lenders and the valuers. But the reason we can do that is because we've basically got all of the valuers using Valos anyway. So it's like an easy integration, but we're not doing the panel management business itself. We're not in that space. There's, VAS and Method and a few others are in that space that do a fantastic job. We're not certainly not treading on their toes, but we're just providing underlying tech to whoever wants to use it in that space.
It's quite interesting because
CVM was the other one I was going to say.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because we've actually built a similar tool internally where we effectively are all three. So solicitors, valuers, and monitoring surveyors. We actually have a platform that creates from the loan summaries, basically creates a template for them to give a quote on whatever sort of developments or HMOs, as you say, HMO refurb or whatever. They come back with a quote, and then we actually also have an automated instruction letter as well.
Nice.
And then we have tools which give the respective professional a kick up the arse when we're waiting for their reports to come back. Because time is, we're often involved in quite time sensitive transactions. So very interesting. And then we also have a tool which we have parser tools, which basically take the professional reports and extracts all the relevant information from those professional reports as well. So
nice.
Independently we've built our own stuff like that. So
awesome.
it's quite cool like that. So I'll have to give you a demo of that sometime.
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
And then just in terms of like the future, like what's, we obviously talked about growth, but is, at some point, as many tech founders, you're probably dreaming of, dreaming of your unicorn exit. Is that something that's on your mind? You've got your angels, but at some point you're going to look at taking some proper sort of seed money or look at some sort of merger or acquisition? Or is that too far in the future for you to contemplate?
No, it's always something that we are thinking about, and the reason why it was important for us to build the business how we've built it, where fundamentally financially we operate well and within our own means, and we reinvest our own capital, is because we don't have to go cap in hand to a VC and ask for money. And so if the terms that someone offers us are not good, we can walk away. And that's important in any negotiation. Sure. You should always have the ability to walk away. Whereas if we were burning capital, had a few months runway and needed to raise, then there's very little room for negotiation there, because ultimately if we don't take capital on, then we just kind of essentially go bankrupt. So the only reason why we had raised capital is for something good and exciting, i.e. going into, I don't know, North America or doing something bigger that requires more financial backing. But, and that could also be, as you said, a merger or an acquisition. There's some interesting tech firms out there in the property space, which I think could fit in quite well within our ecosystem. So exploring those opportunities as well is probably something that we are going to look at, but we have the possibility of choosing a couple of different options, and we can take our time making the decision so that it's right for us and importantly right for our clients. Because I think one of the things I've always been apprehensive of, especially raising external capital, is what you're doing as a founder and appealing to your market, is that aligned with what the VC wants, and are you both on the same page? And I don't think that often that is the case, because ultimately the VCs aren't answerable to you or your clients. They're answerable to their LPs, whoever's invested into that fund, and they need to show returns. And sometimes that forces you to take actions that you don't want to take, because if you don't take them, then they don't show the returns that they need to on their books and so on. And it means that they can't raise for their next fund and so on. So I think the important thing is, if you do raise capital, having someone that is strategically aligned to what you want to do and doesn't push you away from your clients, or get into that position, as we said before, of, oh, here's a really good way to increase revenue, charge your clients an extra 20%, bam, overnight you've increased your revenue 20%. It doesn't make sense, and it's super short-sighted. So there's lots of options available to us. We just have to be strategic in what it is that we do. And we also want to not overextend ourselves, right?
Well,
you don't want to take on too much too soon and then lose focus.
Yeah, I think there's an underestimation of that people sometimes are in such a hurry.
Yeah.
But people forget like what you can achieve. People sometimes think, they want to kind of get to the final, their sort of ultimate destination, and they think it should happen in 12, 18 months. And I think that they overestimate what they can achieve in a year and completely underestimate what they can achieve in 5 or 10. Yeah. And I guess the approach that you're taking maybe is if you take a slightly more conservative approach in the short term, but actually, if I look at Avamore as a business, we've been going for, we're into 11th year now. And I think about all the businesses that were around when we started, and there was a business called Amicus that was every broker's favorite specialist lender, they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And you see people come and go by the wayside, or established names that disappear, and new people coming in, of course. And I think the key thing is like, but we're still here.
Yes.
And it's like we're still here, we're still growing, and we're doing, we because we've been able to do, keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep being revenue generative. You can then do things like invest in and develop your own tech, in ways, and create a subsidized podcast episodes, which gives an opportunity to showcase talented people like yourself. But you can't do that if you don't have the revenue that comes from the sort of the day-to-day bread and butter, right?
Exactly. And I think you, like us, we make decisions for the long term, and sometimes you don't see an immediate short-term benefit, but over the course of time, you'll see that benefit. Whereas if you're relying on external capital, you have to show short-term benefit all the time. And it doesn't allow you to plan 5-10 years ahead, because you don't have that wiggle room, and you don't have that authority to dictate your own future.
Yeah, I think it's that being. I think if you're going to, I would imagine if you're going to take money from anyone, it probably has to be quite strategic money, because it's got to be something that's going to unlock a market for you, an opportunity for you that just otherwise wouldn't be able to take advantage of, I guess.
Exactly that.
Yeah,
exactly that.
And as we start the wind down, like outside of work, or any things that you sort of like to do, or kind of keep you on the level.
Yeah, the stuff I like to do is not a lot of stuff I have time to do. God, yeah, anything that keeps me active, I like. Whether it be football, working out, paddle, which is pretty good. I can't say I'm amazing at it, but like it's good fun. Anything that just keeps your mind occupied and busy, so you don't have time for thinking about work. Because when I'm sat and I'm idle, that's when like thoughts come, ideas come, and so on. So I always try and do things that kind of keep my mind off things, for sure. And where's the office now? Are you still in your mum's shed, or have you upgraded?
No,
there's 18 of us now. I think we'd all have an issue fitting into my shed. I think my mum would be pretty annoyed if we were messing up the garden as well, walking to and from. So no, we're in offices in Old Street now. Very typical for any tech firm. So the plan is do what every tech firm does. You go garage or shed, then Old Street, and then Silicon Valley. Watch this space. Yeah, exactly. But no, Old Street, we've been there, and we've been in a WeWork there since we first got offices. And the nice thing about that was, first office was a 4-person desk in there, and then we just slowly, as we've grown, it's been quite comical, because as we've grown, we've got bigger offices in the same space, but on higher floors as well. So we started off on the first floor, and now we're on the 7th floor in a 20.
Now you've got nice view as well.
Loads. Great view. Windows everywhere. Good floor to ceiling height. It's perfect.
Yeah, well, we're actually about to do our I think I worked it out as our 5th office move in.
Oh wow!
In what will be 11 years.
Where are you moving to?
The same building. So we've been in Cannon Place since 2018, August 2018, and we've moved twice. We've been in 2 different spaces in Cannon Place. We're about to move to our third space in Cannon Place. So that's
exciting.
Just keep getting bigger. Keep getting a bigger office. But again, serviced offices are I'm a fan.
Yeah, they're really useful when you're in that growth stage. At a certain point, they're not that good value for money, because what you end up doing is paying for a lot of amenities that you never use. When you first started looking around, we're like, okay, great, we've got beer on tap, which is free, you've got pool tables and snooker tables and table tennis tables and whatever. Like, this would be great, we'll all use it. In reality, you don't use any of those amenities. You're there to work. And then when we do go and have a drink as a team or whatever, for some reason we go to the pub and pay for it when you've got free beers downstairs.
Because you want to do something social, and you're going to be sitting at the WeWork beer tap. Is that probably still feels like being in the office.
Exactly.
Right? So,
exactly.
Because you are. Okay, so just like kind of the closing tradition is. The closing tradition of the podcast is asking you, if you were to have a conversation with your younger self, what advice would you give to yourself, and why?
I would say, don't lose focus, get your head down, work hard, and don't worry about all the external noise and what other people are doing, and everything eventually will work out.
Nice. Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, Alex, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, we'll talk to you again hopefully soon.
Sounds good.
To all of our audience, thank you so much for joining us. I've been Michael Dean. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. Many thanks to today's technical support, Matt. So yeah, he's given us a thumbs up. Thanks to Davina and Versta, our editor and our producer. And we'll talk to you again on the next one. Thanks and bye bye.